I'm sure one of your best matches up there is another match with me and Sting at Nitro. I'm sure that's got to be in your top 15 matches.
Of course, I just watched that the other day again.
And that match doesn't exist without the preparation and without Sting and I working together a couple times.
That clip you heard there, by the way, was from the Match Anatomy segment I did as part of the countdown, this very countdown here with Diamond Dallas Page back on episode 416. When he talked about his Halloween Havoc match with Bill Goldberg, he brought up the match with Sting on Nitro, which was in fact a match I planned to cover here on this list. This is match number 14 of 15 from WCW Monday Nitro, April 26, 1999, at the Fargo Dome in Fargo, North Dakota. I didn't plan it this way, but yes, the same week we learned that Sting's career has come to an end, we've got one of his best matches here in this countdown. It is Sting challenging Diamond Dallas Page for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. You can find the match on the WWE Network in the Nitro section. It was also on the very best of WCW Monday Nitro DVD that they put out a few years ago. This is the fifth Sting match in this countdown, and the third one for DDP, and it's also the fifth world title win for Sting. DDP had won the championship, his first WCW title, only 2 weeks before this at Spring Stampede, in a four-way against Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Sting, with Randy Savage as the guest referee, and then DDP ended up turning heel on Nitro the very next night. People had grown tired of the whole People's Champ shtick, and Page beat Goldberg with a pair of brass knucks and attacked him after the match with a chair to solidify the turn. So we come to Nitro here. And the match with Sting and DDP, it wasn't even the main event of the show. It headlined the start of hour number 2 here on this 3-hour show. This was during Nitro's 3-hour phase, which I'm pretty sure went the entire rest of the year. I think they went back to 2 hours at the beginning of 2000, but I could be wrong. They obviously timed this match to coincide with Raw going on the air that night. There would be a reason for this. The fact that this was not the main event on the show. It would become clear later on. We'll get to that. I thought the match itself was great. The fans were super into it. It sounded like they had 20 or 30,000 people in there. And I was very surprised to read that it was only 11,000. They had 11,000 in the Fargo Dome, but they were a loud 11,000. Toward the end of this thing, Sting went for a pile driver on Page, but he fell to his knees instead. So basically like a tombstone, but he had Page facing outward in position for like a standard pile driver. It resembled more of a Ganzo bomb. It reminded me of a spot in the Ultimate Warrior Rick Rude match at SummerSlam 89. I've seen that match enough times to... I don't know that I have every spot memorized, but that's my favorite of the matches that they had in WWE. I don't know if Rude was trying to go for a power bomb or what he was attempting in that match, but he ended up just... He had the Warrior up, he kind of fell to his knees, dropped Warrior on the back of his head. That's what this was, except Sting dropped Page on his head, only for a 2 count. Then came what I thought was just the sequence of the match. Place went nuts for this. Sting picks Page up for a proper tombstone pile driver. And Page reverses it into his own tombstone. Sting immediately reverses that into a tombstone, and this time he nails it. And I watched this, and I always wondered why we never got that sequence in an Undertaker match at WrestleMania. I mean, unless he did it, and I'm just totally blanking on this. You know, I'm not talking about like one guy reversing the tombstone into another one. I mean the double reversal spot where Undertaker has him up, guy reverses it, Undertaker reverses the guy, and then drops him for the tombstone. The only time I ever remember Undertaker working that into one of his matches, it was an In Your House match against Steve Austin. It was in '97. And it got such a great reaction. It just looks fucking cool, right? As long as you can muscle the guy up, it looks like a relatively easy thing to do. I mean, that's easy for me to say, I guess. You got, 2 300-pound guys in there. But it's not overly complicated. It's just a double reversal spot. And I always thought that would make for a hell of a finish to an Undertaker match at WrestleMania. I don't expect him to try that with Shane McMahon this year. Okay? I don't expect Shane McMahon to reverse The Undertaker into position for a tombstone. I would not count on seeing that spot in their match. But again, though, Sting only gets a 2 count. Great near fall. People are just losing their minds. Sting and Page get locked in a backslide. Page gives Sting a low blow from behind. The referee didn't see it. Gets Sting in the corner. He goes for the diamond cutter. He hooks his head for the diamond cutter, but Sting hooks the top rope. Doesn't go. Page tries again. And again, Sting hooks the top rope. Doesn't go. And instead, he hooks Page's head for the Scorpion Death Drop, and boom, down he goes. Crowd explodes. Sting goes for the cover, gets the 3. Sting is the new WCW World Heavyweight Champion. DDP's first reign comes to an end after just 2 weeks. I cannot emphasize enough how lively this crowd was for this match. I can't speak for the entirety of the show, because I only saw part of it, but this was just so much fun to watch. It was just a really good match, but the atmosphere just made it that much better. And if you only watch this match, if this is the only match that you watched of WCW, let's say from this show, you would never know that WCW was on its way down the tubes. This looked like the number 1 promotion in the world. But we still had 2 hours left to go. So let me set the stage for you here, okay? Because this is just amazing what was going on in WCW at the time. This was around the time that Ric Flair was committed to a mental institution, which is probably where the people who booked this show should have been sent. And so with Flair in the nut house, Charles Robinson, okay, yes, referee Charles Robinson, Little Nate, was appointed the vice president of WCW. He was put in charge of booking this show in storyline. Although it wouldn't shock me to find out that it was a shoot and he actually did book the show. But here's the thing, okay? So Roddy Piper, who's also on the show, and I guess there must have been a power struggle going on at the time, Roddy Piper thinks he's in charge. So Ric Flair finds out about this. He calls Robinson up on the phone from the mental asylum, mind you, to tell him that he's not happy about Piper having power, and he wants Lil Nate to call in the National Guard to deal with this problem. He says this while yelling at the other patients for touching his robe. Now, later in the show, Charles Robinson has Piper arrested, and he fires him from WCW. Okay, so you got all that? Kevin Nash decides that he wants a 4-way main event tonight with himself, Goldberg, DDP, and Sting for Sting's newly won WCW World Title. Flair calls up Lil Nate. I don't know how many phone calls you're entitled to when you're in the mental hospital, but this was at least the second one. He calls Robinson up on the phone. He tells him, make the match. I just love the idea that Ric Flair is watching Nitro from a mental asylum. I feel like this show, especially at that time, would legitimately be the programming of choice in such a place. You'd have to be a mental patient to watch this show. So later on, they do another skit from the mental hospital, and we see Scott Hall. Scott Hall just shows up. He's wearing a gown like he's one of the patients. I don't think he had been on WCW television in months. I don't think anybody had really heard from him. He just shows up as one of the patients. This is never mentioned. This is never brought up again. So this all leads to the 4-way main event. Randy Savage gets involved. He gives DDP the assist. He tosses him a pair of brass knucks. He uses them on Nash. He gets the pin, and he wins back the title. So in the span of 2 hours, DDP lost and won back the championship. And for those wondering, whatever happened to Ric Flair in the mental hospital, you'll be happy to know that Flair got out a week later, and he explained that Arn Anderson had bailed him out. I didn't know that's how it worked when you're committed to an insane asylum, that if you want to get out, all you need to do is have someone post bail for you. Seems kind of dangerous to me. I can only imagine somebody listening to this who never watched WCW a day in their lives. All they know is John Cena and Randy Orton. What they must be thinking. It either sounds like the worst show in the world or the best. I feel like there's no in between. And I will say, it does sound more entertaining than what they force feed us on Raw on most weeks. But 2 years later, and this is important, 2 years after this, there was no WCW. So there is something to be said, I think, for at least trying to have things make sense. So that brings us to our final match in the countdown next week. We've got one match left in the countdown. So good luck guessing what it is.